Today we're looking at a paper out of the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, and it's the title that caught my eye with this particular paper. It's titled, "Could the Deep Squat Predict Weightlifting Performance?" So immediately I thought that the researchers were suggesting that a jumping test might just be able to tell us how much a lifter will total in a competition. Now that does seem a bit of a stretch, but it seems to be where they were going. But when you look at the hypothesis, the researchers posed, to quote, these hypotheses. This research was carried out with a double response to describe and compare the deep squat jump with the squat jump and the counter movement jumps, and to evaluate the deep squat jump as a useful testing tool to predict performance in strength and power athletes such as weightlifters. Now, the last line seems to give them a little bit broader of a focus from specifically weightlifting performance. They want to generalize their results to the performance in other groups, potentially to powerlifters, strongman athletes, throwers, and the numerous other sports that are strength and power dominant, and even potentially strength and power dominant positions within a variety of other sports. Now, at several points throughout this paper, the researchers also seem to hint, or actually they restate their intent to evaluate the use of jump measurements as a means to monitor and control training. This is a functionally different hypothesis, or a fundamentally different intent than stated in their hypothesis. This could be a problem. Well, let's just get on to the methods to see what's going on. They used three different subject pools. Three different subject pools were tested in three different styles of jump tests: the semi-standard counter movement vertical jump, the squat jump, which is a squat jump from a knees at 90 degrees static jump, and then they did a squat bottom of the squat jump, which is also static, starting at the very bottom of the range of motion. Now, none of these jumps allowed arm swing. So that's one way that they controlled that everything was about the hip and knees and ankle extension. Okay, the subject pools were interesting and curious at the same time, because in the context of the hypothesis and methods, it was sort of an oddity. Pool 1 were experienced competitive weightlifters stated to be elite. Well, let's pull up their descriptive data here. And we can see that their weightlifters could snatch 97 kilos, clean and jerk 119 kilos, and total on average 216 kilos. That descriptive data presented there for lifting performance does not jive with the author's statement that these are elite athletes. These are not going to be medalists in general at international events. In most instances, a 216 kilo total is going to not get you on the podium at a national event, often not even at a local event. So we have a little bit of an issue with the description of the subjects not being factual. Now, Pool 2 were experienced competitive triathletes, also stated to be elite. However, there was absolutely no data, no event performance data for these subjects, and as such, we can't determine whether they were actually elite or not. And interestingly, for all subject pools, there was never a description of their training protocols or training states. Pool 3 were university physical education students, and they were considered to be the control group. Once again, there was no description of their physical capacity. Now, the title implies an attempt to correlate vertical jump with weightlifting performance, but the triathletes and the students were never tested for their strength on any strength measurement at all, period. Rather, the researchers did a comparison of the results of the 3 jumps between and across the 3 groups, and that's where the participation of the triathletes and the physical education students ended. All right. Now, let's take a look at what they found in that experiment. Well, now, unsurprisingly, when you look at this graphic, you'll see things that don't surprise you. Weightlifters jumped higher than the other groups. And some people might be surprised by this one, but the control group jumped higher than the triathletes. Triathletes generally train in slow twitch methods, so they're not going to have a very high vertical jump. So it's not surprising that a, well, presumably untrained control group would have a higher vertical jump. Okay, so we know that weightlifters jump higher than the triathletes in all 3 jumps. Does that tell us anything about predicting how much a lifter will snatch or clean and jerk in competition? No, there's not a chance of doing that. So where do we go? How do we get from point A to point B in that huge task that has been set forward by the researchers? Well, let's continue on and see what they did. Now, the researchers compared the competition results of the lifters to their jump results. The assumption obviously being that the higher the jump, the more weight that the individual would be able to lift. Now, in the section that was called Weightlifting Performance Prediction, the researchers specifically quoted deep squat jump can be used as a strength training tool in the monitoring and control of training in weightlifting because the mode of testing is carefully matched to the sport that the athlete usually performs. How is that any more matched to the sport than the other 2 jumps? This is never made clear in any bit of the paper. Further, the counter movement jump was only surpassed in correlation to the deep squat static jump when the results were treated with the body weight correcting formula, the Sinclair formula. This is the formula that's used to determine best lifters at weightlifting competitions. Now, the strongest statement that is made in this entire paper is about a 60%, is that about 60% of the variance in weights lifted by the subjects could be detected by linear regression using the jump data. Okay. But the researchers also acknowledge that the best previous attempt at establishing such a relationship by other researchers resulted in an explanation of only 22% of the variance in lifting performance. So their data significantly varies from what other than preceding data. Now, but even with 40%, remember this, 40% of lifting performance unaccounted for, in one of the last papers or paragraphs in the paper, the following passage appears. Both counter movement jump and deep squat jump are strongly correlated with weightlifting ability and could predict its performance. They're still saying it predicts performance. Therefore, both can be introduced as a strength testing tool in the monitoring and control of weight training or control of training in weightlifting. Wow, that's still a pretty darn strong statement. And one would assume that if someone is strongly recommending a test for a single purpose to predict and control weightlifting performance, that they would have a method for implementation, a method for evaluation, and a method of application for use in prediction of performance. Sadly, none of this is even hinted at in the paper. The reader is left to just to wildly speculate on what the researchers actually meant. Now, the bottom line is, are you, as a coach, willing or even desiring to use a jump test that's only capable of predictive certainty, is only capable of about 60% success rate of predictive certainty, and is without a means of application to your trainees? Are you willing to use such a tool? Well, first, how can you use it if it's not described? And I'm assuming the obvious question, or the obvious answer to the former part of this question, was probably no.